At 3:06 a.m., something impossible fell out of the sky above Noctis Vale. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a shuttle. It was a piano. The black concert piano tore through the artificial storm clouds beneath the city's weather dome, spinning silently through sheets of silver rain before crashing through the roof of St. Veron Medical Tower. Steel beams snapped. Glass exploded across 3 hospital floors. Emergency alarms screamed awake. And somehow, impossibly, the piano landed upright inside the neonatal ward without touching a single child. For 17 long seconds, every baby in the room stopped crying. Then came the knocking from inside the instrument. Lieutenant Lyra Kane arrived 11 minutes later. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her charcoal coat as she crossed the emergency barricade. Above her, the colossal weather shield shimmered faintly over Noctis Vale, protecting the city from the toxic atmosphere beyond its borders. Neon reflections stretched across flooded streets below elevated railways and crowded residential towers disappearing into the fog. The city never truly slept. Tonight, though, it felt awake in the wrong way. Her partner, Dax Mercer, stood outside the hospital entrance holding 2 coffees and looking deeply irritated by existence itself. "You're late," he said. "You called me at 3 in the morning. You're still late." Lyra took the coffee from him. "What exploded?" Dax glanced toward the damaged upper floors. "That's the problem. Nothing exploded." The ambulance lights painted his face red and blue as rescue drones circled above the ruined roof. "You ever seen a piano survive terminal velocity?" he asked. Lyra stopped walking. "A what?" "Exactly." Inside the hospital, chaos moved in controlled lines. Medics rushed patients through temporary corridors while engineers scanned the structure for collapse risks. Nurses whispered nervously near the elevators. Fear lived in the building now. Not panic. Fear was quieter. Dax handed her a digital evidence pad while they walked. "Impact registered at full descent speed," he explained. "Object should have shattered on contact." Lyra watched the footage carefully. The piano punched through reinforced steel roofing, bounced once across the ward floor, then settled upright between hospital cribs as if placed there deliberately. Then the lid opened from the inside. A small hand emerged. Lyra replayed the clip. "No blood. None. Injuries. Kid doesn't even have bruises." "That's impossible." Dax gave her a tired look. "You're saying that a lot tonight." They reached the isolation wing on the lower medical floor. 2 armed officers stood outside the room looking visibly relieved to see someone else take responsibility. The attending physician met them near the doorway. "You need to understand," she said quietly. "We ran every scan available." "And?" Lyra asked. "No fractures. No implants. No toxins. No registration code anywhere in the federal census." Dax frowned. "Everybody has a registration code." "Apparently not him." The boy sat calmly on the hospital bed wrapped in gray thermal blankets. He looked around 9 years old, pale and thin, with dark hair still wet from rainwater. Fine silver dust clung to his sleeves like metallic ash. He looked directly at Lyra as she entered. Not frightened. Waiting. Lyra approached carefully. "What's your name?" The boy answered immediately. "Elias." "Last name?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't remember." Dax leaned against the wall. "Convenient." Lyra ignored him. "Do you know where you are?" "Yes." "Where?" "Noctis Vale." His voice was soft but strangely precise, like someone repeating information exactly as taught. Lyra crouched slightly. "How did you arrive here?" "I fell." Dax rubbed his face. "Wonderful." Lyra studied the boy carefully. "People don't survive falling through buildings, Elias." "I wasn't supposed to hit the hospital." The room went still. "What were you supposed to hit?" Lyra asked. "The river." Outside the room, thunder rolled across the weather dome. Except it wasn't thunder. The sound scraped, metal against glass. Every light in the hallway flickered once. Dax glanced upward immediately. "Tell me that's maintenance." Nobody answered him. Elias pulled the blanket tighter around himself. "The second one is coming," he whispered. Lyra turned toward the rain-covered window. The storm above Noctis Vale suddenly split apart. A red commuter tram emerged from the clouds. It hung suspended for one impossible second beneath the weather shield, interior lights glowing softly against the rain. Through the windows, Lyra could see empty seats and advertisements still flickering. Then gravity took hold. The tram dropped between the skyscrapers. Its impact shook the Eastern District hard enough to crack nearby windows. Screams echoed from the streets below. Emergency sirens erupted across the city. By sunrise, 13 impossible objects had fallen from the sky. A tram, a marble staircase, a lighthouse lantern, an iron elevator cage, a carousel horse still spinning after impact, a dining table set for guests who no longer existed. None of the objects belonged to Noctis Vale. None breached the weather shield from outside. They simply appeared inside the storm and fell. The government blamed terrorists before dawn. Religious networks called it divine judgment before breakfast. By morning, the entire city was terrified. Lyra stood in the observation corridor outside Elias's room, watching emergency broadcasts spread panic across every public screen. Dax approached carrying fresh coffees. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" he asked quietly. The sinkholes. 3 months earlier, entire streets in the lower districts had begun collapsing overnight. The city government sealed the underground transit sectors afterward and classified all excavation reports. Officially, structural instability. Unofficially, workers heard voices beneath the city. Then people started disappearing. Now objects were falling from nowhere. And a child had arrived inside a piano talking about things underneath Noctis Vale. "No coincidences left," Lyra murmured. Suddenly every screen in the hospital flickered black. The hallway lights dimmed. One by one, monitors across the building died. Then white letters appeared simultaneously across every display. "Hello, Lyra Kane." Nobody moved. Dax stared at the nearest monitor. "Okay, I officially hate tonight." More words appeared. "You found the first witness." Inside the isolation room, Elias slowly climbed off the bed, fear spreading across his face for the first time. The final sentence formed across every screen in the hospital. "The door below Noctis Vale is opening." The building trembled violently. Not from above. From beneath. A crack split the hospital floor near Lyra's boots. Then another. Screams erupted deeper in the corridor as lights burst overhead in showers of sparks. Dax grabbed Lyra's arm. "We need to move now." But Elias wasn't looking at the collapsing hallway. He was staring downward, listening. Then he whispered for words that froze Lyra where she stood. "They found me already." The hospital floor split open like paper. Concrete cracked beneath Lyra Kane's boots as the corridor lurched sideways. Ceiling panels collapsed in showers of sparks, while terrified patients screamed somewhere beyond the smoke. Emergency lights flashed crimson through the chaos. And beneath it all came a sound that did not belong underground. Breathing. Deep. Slow. Ancient. Dax Mercer shoved Lyra against the wall as part of the ceiling crashed where she had been standing half a second earlier. "Move!" he shouted. Inside the isolation room, Elias stood frozen beside the hospital bed, staring downward as if listening to someone beneath the earth. The crack in the corridor widened. Blackness opened below. Not dirt. Not sewer tunnels. An empty depth descending far beyond the city foundations. Lyra grabbed Elias by the arm just as the floor gave way entirely. The corridor collapsed. For one violent moment they were weightless. Then Dax caught a support rail with one hand while clutching Lyra's coat with the other. The three of them swung above darkness. Chunks of broken concrete vanished soundlessly below. No impact. No bottom. Dax strained against the rail. "This city officially sucks." Lyra held Elias tightly with one arm while reaching upward. "Pull us up." "I'm trying." The metal support groaned. Below them something moved. Not quickly. Massively. Like an entire structure turning beneath the city. Then came the whisper. "Elias." The voice drifted upward from the abyss below, thin and distant, yet close enough to touch the inside of Lyra's skull. Elias squeezed his eyes shut. Don't listen to him. Dax looked down once and instantly regretted it. There's something down there. The support rail snapped. They fell. But not far. Emergency suspension cables deployed automatically from the collapsing ceiling, catching them hard enough to bruise ribs. The trio slammed against the side of the broken corridor above the endless dark. Hospital evacuation alarms blared overhead. Lyra climbed first, dragging Elias upward while Dax hauled himself onto stable flooring beside them. The moment they reached safety, the crack beneath the corridor sealed itself. Not naturally. The concrete flowed together like liquid flesh stitching closed. Dax stared at it. No, absolutely not. Buildings don't heal. Neither Lyra nor Elias answered, because every light in the hallway had just gone out. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Then footsteps echoed below them, heavy, measured, coming from inside the sealed floor. Dax slowly drew his sidearm. Tell me the city isn't haunted. Elias looked up. He sent the collectors. The footsteps stopped directly beneath them. Then the floor bulged upward. A human hand pushed through solid concrete. Gray fingers emerged first, followed by a second hand clawing through the tile as if the floor itself were soft mud. Then a head surfaced slowly from beneath the corridor. The thing wore a black porcelain mask with no eyes, only a smiling mouth. Dax fired instantly. The shot exploded through the creature's forehead. Kept climbing. More figures emerged behind it, dragging themselves soundlessly through the floor. Long black coats, bone-white masks, hands too long for human bodies. There were 7 of them. The first collector tilted its head toward Elias. Found, it whispered. Lyra grabbed Elias and ran. The corridor behind them erupted as the collectors surged upward from the floor in complete silence except for the clicking of their joints. Dax fired repeatedly while retreating backward. Bullets slowed them but didn't stop them. Why are they still moving? One collector lunged forward unnaturally fast. Lyra slammed a fire suppression lever beside the wall. Steel emergency shutters dropped instantly between corridor sections. The collector hit the closing barrier hard enough to dent metal inward. The entire shutter shook violently. Then another. Then another. Dax grabbed Lyra's shoulder. Those things are going through eventually. Then we leave eventually faster. The hospital had become a war zone. Smoke flooded the upper levels while civilians crowded evacuation stairwells. Security officers shouted conflicting orders through overloaded comm systems. Outside the massive windows, Noctis Vale drowned beneath stormlight and emergency sirens. And things were still falling from the sky. A church bell crashed into the financial district 2 blocks away. Something resembling an entire apartment balcony slammed through an elevated transit rail. People on the streets below ran in every direction beneath the flickering glow of the weather shield. The city looked like it was remembering a disaster nobody else remembered. Lyra pushed through the evacuation crowd toward the underground transit elevators. Dax caught up beside her. Please tell me we're not taking the subway during the apocalypse. We're not going down there willingly. Good. We're going because Elias knows something. Terrible. That's terrible. Elias suddenly stopped walking. Hundreds of civilians rushed around him while alarms screamed overhead. But the boy stood perfectly still. They opened another door, he whispered. The lights flickered again. Then every digital screen nearby activated simultaneously. Advertisements vanished. Maps disappeared. Security feeds died. A single symbol appeared across every surface in the station. A black circle with a vertical line through its center. Elias stepped backward immediately. The Hollow King. The station floor trembled. Passengers began screaming as cracks spread across the tiles. One commuter pointed upward. The weather shield above Noctis Vale was changing. Hairline fractures spread slowly across the enormous transparent dome stretching over the city. Thin glowing lines spiderwebbed outward across the artificial sky. Dax stared upward through the glass ceiling overhead. If that shield breaks. Nobody finished the sentence. Outside the dome waited storms toxic enough to strip flesh from bone within minutes. The city existed because the shield existed. And now it was cracking. A new voice suddenly echoed across the transit station speakers. Calm, male, inhumanly clear. Citizens of Noctis Vale, it said softly. The forgetting is over. Every person in the station froze. Lyra felt Elias trembling beside her. The city below your city has awakened, the voice continued. Return what was stolen, and the Hollow King may permit some of you to survive. Dax looked around wildly. Who the hell is broadcasting this? Elias answered quietly. He's not broadcasting. The station lights died completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Then came the sound of thousands of footsteps moving somewhere beneath the city. Not above. Below. Coming upward. One emergency light flickered back on near the far end of the station. In its dim red glow stood a single figure wearing a smooth white mask. One collector. Then another stepped beside it. Then dozens. They filled the station platform silently, standing shoulder to shoulder like mourners at a funeral. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then every collector raised one arm simultaneously and pointed directly at Elias. The nearest one spoke. Bring us the witness. And the entire station rushed forward at once. The collectors moved like a tidal wave. No screams. No battle cries. Only the synchronized thunder of footsteps rushing through the darkened transit station. Run! Dax Mercer shouted. Panic exploded instantly. Passengers scattered across the platform as the masked figures surged forward through the crowd. Some collectors moved unnaturally fast, slipping between civilians with insect-like precision. Others simply walked, calm and unstoppable, while terrified people slammed into each other trying to escape. Lyra Kane grabbed Elias's hand and sprinted toward the lower maintenance tunnels behind the station platform. Dax fired repeatedly over his shoulder. Gunfire echoed through the underground chamber. One collector's mask shattered apart, revealing nothing beneath it. No face, no skull, only black emptiness moving inside the coat. Dax nearly missed his next shot. Oh, that's disgusting. The thing kept coming. Lyra reached the emergency service gate and slammed her shoulder against the control panel. The rusted steel door twitched halfway open before jamming. Dax! I'm a little busy. A collector launched itself across the platform toward him with horrifying speed. Dax rolled aside just as it crashed into a transit pillar hard enough to crack concrete. The creature twisted its neck toward him. The smiling porcelain mask remained perfectly intact. Dax emptied the rest of his magazine directly into it. Stay dead for once. The impacts slowed it only briefly. Behind them, civilians screamed as more collectors climbed directly out of the station floor itself, emerging from solid tile like corpses surfacing from water. Elias suddenly stepped forward. Move, he whispered. The nearest collectors froze. Not all of them, only the closest 6. Their heads tilted unnaturally toward the boy. For one impossible second, the station became completely silent. Then all 6 collectors stepped backward simultaneously. Lyra stared at Elias. What did you do? I asked. The moment broke instantly. More collectors rushed past the frozen ones. Dax slammed the maintenance gate open fully. Questions later. The 3 of them squeezed into the dark service tunnel just as the station platform disappeared beneath chaos. Dax sealed the gate behind them manually. Heavy impacts slammed against the steel door almost immediately. Once, twice, again. The entire frame bent inward. Lyra pulled Elias deeper into the tunnel while Dax secured the emergency locks. The narrow passage smelled ancient. Wet stone, dust, something older beneath both. Emergency lights flickered weakly overhead, revealing maintenance pipes running along curved concrete walls, disappearing into darkness below Noctis Vale. Far below, the tunnel descended far deeper than any city transit map allowed. Dax noticed it too. These tunnels aren't public infrastructure. Lyra nodded slowly. No city records mention levels this deep. Elias walked ahead quietly, as if he already knew the way. The banging behind the maintenance door stopped suddenly. Complete silence followed. Dax frowned. I don't like that. Then came the whispering. Soft voices echoed through the tunnel walls around them. Thousands of voices layered together. Not speaking words. Remembering them. Lyra felt cold spread through her arms. Elias, she said carefully. What exactly are the collectors? The boy didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, people who stayed too long below. Dax blinked. That explanation somehow made things worse. The tunnel widened gradually until it opened into an enormous underground rail chamber. And Lyra stopped breathing for a moment. A city existed beneath Noctis Vale. Not ruins. Not abandoned infrastructure. A real city. Ancient towers stretched into darkness illuminated by dim amber lights still functioning somehow after decades, or centuries. Suspended rail bridges crossed vast empty spaces above streets buried beneath dust. Thousands of abandoned apartments stared outward through cracked windows. Silent. Waiting. Dax slowly lowered his weapon. Nobody told us this was here. No, Lyra whispered. Nobody had. No maps. No history records. Nothing. Yet an entire civilization slept beneath Noctis Vale. Elias stepped onto the old platform carefully. This was the first city. Lyra looked around in disbelief. Impossible. The upper city was built after the fire. What fire? Elias pointed upward toward the unseen world above them. The one everyone forgot. A distant metallic sound echoed through the underground city. Train tracks humming. Something was moving below. Dax heard it too. Please tell me there aren't subway trains down here. Lights flickered alive across the ancient rail system one by one far into the darkness. A train approached, but no sound of engines came with it. Only silence. The train emerged slowly from the shadows. Black metal. Windowless. Covered in pale handprints. It glided toward the platform without touching the rails. Then stopped directly in front of them. The doors opened. Inside sat passengers. Hundreds of them. Perfectly still. Men, women, children. All wearing white porcelain masks. Every head turned toward Lyra simultaneously. Dax took one full step backward. Absolutely not. One masked passenger slowly stood inside the train. Unlike the collectors, this figure wore elegant black clothing untouched by dust or age. Its porcelain mask had no smile painted on it. Only blankness. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere inside the station at once. The witness returns below, it said softly. Elias lowered his head. Lyra raised her weapon immediately. Who are you? The figure ignored her completely. Instead it addressed Elias. The Hollow King mourns your absence. The boy's face tightened with fear. He's waking up too early. The train lights flickered violently. Far above them, the underground chamber trembled hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Another fracture spread across the weather shield somewhere overhead. Dax looked upward instinctively. How much time before that dome collapses? Nobody answered, because deep beneath the city, something enormous had just opened its eyes. The entire underground station groaned around them. Then came the sound. A heartbeat. One pulse. So powerful the tracks vibrated beneath their feet. Another followed. Slower. Louder. The masked passengers all stood together at once. The blank-faced figure extended one pale hand toward Elias. The king calls for his son. Lyra immediately pulled Elias behind her. But the boy whispered something that made both her and Dax freeze. He's not talking about me. Nobody spoke after Elias's words. The underground station seemed to inhale around them. He's not talking about me. The sentence hung in the cold air while the ancient train waited silently at the platform. Its black metal surface reflected the weak amber lights overhead like dark water. Dax Mercer tightened his grip on his weapon. Okay, fantastic. That means there's another creepy mystery child somewhere. But Lyra Kane barely heard him, because the heartbeat beneath the city had changed. Closer now. The entire station pulsed faintly with each massive thud rising from the deep. Boom. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Boom. The abandoned towers beyond the tracks flickered with dying electricity. Boom. And somewhere very far below, something began climbing upward. The blank-faced figure inside the train extended its hand again. "The Hollow King waits," it said. Lyra stepped forward instead, placing herself fully between Elias and the train. "I'm done listening to riddles," she said coldly. "Start explaining." The figure tilted its head slightly. Its porcelain mask reflected her face back at her in warped fragments. "You were born above," it replied softly. "You were taught forgetting before language." Dax groaned loudly. "I swear every psychopath in this city talks like a broken poetry machine." The figure ignored him. "The upper city remembers nothing because memory was buried alive." Lyra's jaw tightened. "What happened here?" Silence. Then Elias answered quietly behind her. "There was a war." The station lights flickered again. For a split second, Lyra saw something impossible. Not the abandoned underground city. Another version of it. Alive. Crowded streets beneath warm golden lights. Children running through marketplaces. Music echoing from balconies. Trains moving overhead through glowing tunnels. Then came screaming. Fire. Buildings collapsing inward. Black smoke swallowing the city. And standing at the center of the destruction. Colossal figure with no face. The vision vanished instantly. Lyra stumbled backward. Dax caught her arm. "You okay?" She looked around wildly. The station had returned to darkness and dust. But her pulse hammered now. "You saw it too?" Elias asked carefully. Lyra stared at him. "What was that?" "A memory." "No." Dax interrupted immediately. "No supernatural ghost memories. We are not doing that." The blank-faced conductor stepped off the train. His shoes made no sound against the platform. "The city below was called Evereth," it said. "It existed before Noctis Vale. Before the weather shield. Before the poison storms." Lyra listened despite herself. "Then what happened to it?" The conductor looked upward toward the unseen city above. "The king loved mankind too much." Another tremor rolled through the underground station. This one stronger. Cracks spread across nearby support pillars. Far above them came the muffled sound of distant explosions from the upper city. Dax checked his comm unit. Dead. No signal. Entire networks gone. "Because the city is separating," Elias whispered. Lyra looked at him sharply. "Separating from what?" "The surface." Before anyone could answer, a deafening metallic shriek erupted across the underground chamber. The rail tracks bent violently. The black train trembled. Then every masked passenger turned their heads upward simultaneously. Something was descending from the darkness above. Fast. A shape slammed onto the platform hard enough to crater concrete. One of the collectors, but larger. Its porcelain mask was cracked down the center, revealing shifting darkness underneath. Long iron hooks hung from chains wrapped around its arms. The thing rose slowly. The conductor stepped backward immediately. Even the masked passengers recoiled. Dax raised his gun. Finally, something honest-looking. The creature's broken mask turned toward Elias. Then it spoke in a voice like rusted metal scraping together. "The false heir." Elias flinched hard. Lyra noticed immediately. "You know this thing." The boy shook his head rapidly. "No." The collector lunged. Dax fired first. Bullets shattered chunks from its porcelain face but failed to stop its charge. The creature swung one hook chain across the platform. Lyra ducked barely in time. The hook tore through a steel support beam behind her like paper. The station ceiling cracked loudly overhead. "Run!" Dax shouted. The larger collector moved impossibly fast for something its size. It crashed through abandoned benches and pillars while pursuing Elias directly. The boy froze, not from fear, recognition. "It remembers me," he whispered. The creature raised its hook chain again, and Lyra stepped in front of Elias. The chain slammed into her shoulder hard enough to throw her across the platform. Pain exploded down her arm. Dax emptied another magazine while dragging her behind a pillar. "Lyra!" She gritted her teeth, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Across the station, the giant collector ignored Dax completely. It only watched Elias. The king wakes hungry, it growled. The heartbeat below the city became thunderous now. Boom, boom, boom. Dust rained from the ceiling continuously. Then the impossible happened. Elias stepped toward the creature, and the giant collector knelt. The entire station fell silent. Even the train stopped humming. The massive creature lowered its head before the child like a servant before royalty. Dax stared openly. No, I reject all of this. Elias looked horrified. I didn't tell it to do that. The collector slowly raised one clawed hand toward him. Not threatening, reverent. Then the creature whispered. He returns. The underground city shook violently. A massive crack split the station wall behind them, exposing darkness far beyond the old tunnels. And through that darkness, something enormous moved. Not a creature. A hand. A colossal human hand dragging itself slowly upward through the abyss beneath Evereth. The skin was pale stone, its fingers longer than buildings. And as it climbed toward the underground city, every light in Noctis Vale died at once. Darkness consumed Noctis Vale. Not ordinary darkness, the kind that felt alive. Every tower above the city vanished beyond the shattered glow of emergency fires as the weather shield finally failed in sections across the skyline. Crimson warning lights pulsed through the storm while evacuation sirens screamed across districts already collapsing into panic. Far below, in the buried city of Evereth, Lyra Kane stared at the colossal stone hand dragging itself upward through the abyss. The fingers alone were the size of buildings. Ancient cracks spread across pale skin resembling carved marble stretched over something breathing underneath. Boom! The heartbeat shook the underground city again. Dax Mercer backed away slowly. No, absolutely not. We are officially beyond my salary range. The giant collector still knelt before Elias. He returns, it repeated softly. Elias looked pale with terror. I never came back before. Lyra grabbed him immediately. What does that mean? Before he could answer, the black train behind them screeched violently. Every masked passenger turned toward the abyss simultaneously. Then they began whispering. Thousands of voices. One sentence repeated over and over. The sleeper climbs. The conductor stepped backward toward the train doors. We must depart. Lyra rounded on it. You're not leaving until somebody explains what that thing is. The blank-faced figure paused. Then it spoke the words that changed everything. That is your father. Silence crashed across the station. Even Dax stopped talking. Lyra slowly released Elias's arm. No, she whispered. The conductor tilted its head. The bloodline survived after all. Elias looked ready to collapse. I didn't know. The giant collector suddenly rose from its kneeling position and turned toward the abyss. Something else was coming upward. Something faster. Long black shapes began climbing across the underground walls surrounding Evereth. Hundreds of smaller collectors swarmed downward from ceilings and ruined towers, converging toward the station. Dax checked his empty weapon. We need a new plan immediately. The station trembled harder. Far above, sections of Noctis Vale began falling. Through broken gaps in the underground ceiling, Lyra saw entire chunks of the upper city collapsing inward as the surface infrastructure failed. Burning vehicles tumbled into darkness between towers. Bridges snapped apart. The city was dying from the inside out. Elias stared upward in horror. He's waking too fast. Lyra grabbed him hard enough to make him look at her. Tell me the truth. Right now. The boy trembled visibly. Then finally he spoke. My real name is Selim. The underground heartbeat stopped. For one terrible second, absolute silence consumed everything. Then the abyss below Evereth exploded upward. A massive stone face emerged from darkness beneath the city. Featureless. No eyes. No mouth. Only smooth pale stone large enough to dwarf skyscrapers. The Hollow King. Buildings across the underground city shattered apart as the giant rose higher beneath them. The pressure alone cracked the station platform. Passengers on the black train began screaming behind their masks. Not human screams. Animal panic. The conductor turned sharply toward Elias, toward Selim. He remembers you. The giant collector grabbed Lyra suddenly and threw her sideways just before part of the ceiling collapsed where she had stood. Dax pulled her behind the train as debris rained across the platform. What the hell is he? Selim stood frozen near the edge of the abyss while the Hollow King continued rising below the city. I was made from him, the boy whispered. Lyra felt cold spread through her chest. No. Yes. The Hollow King's faceless head turned slowly upward toward Selim, toward his son. Then the entire underground city heard the voice, not spoken aloud, inside their minds. Return to me. Dax dropped to one knee, clutching his head. Oh God! Make it stop! The psychic pressure hit like drowning beneath freezing water. Lyra felt memories that weren't hers flooding through her mind. Evereth alive beneath golden lights. Scientists building something enormous below the city. A king sacrificing himself during the poison storms to save humanity from extinction. And then, betrayal. The people of Evereth sealing him beneath the earth after he became something else. Something immortal. Something hungry. The vision shattered. Lyra gasped for breath. Selim stood crying silently near the abyss edge. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, he whispered weakly. Above them, Noctis Vale collapsed district by district. The broken weather shield allowed toxic storms to pour into the upper city. Emergency broadcasts echoed faintly through the darkness. Civilian casualties rising. Containment failure. Evacuation impossible. Dax looked upward at the destruction. This whole city's finished. No, Lyra said suddenly. Both he and Selim looked at her. The memories still burned inside her head. The Hollow King hadn't tried to destroy humanity originally. He had tried to save it. He's waking because somebody opened the seal, she realized aloud. The conductor nodded once. The surface government dug too deep beneath Sector 9. Lyra's stomach dropped. 3 months ago. The sinkholes. The classified excavations. The disappearances. Someone in Noctis Vale had broken into Evereth intentionally. And now the thing buried beneath the world was waking up. Another psychic pulse erupted from the Hollow King. Return home, son. Selim screamed suddenly and collapsed to his knees. Dark veins spread briefly beneath his skin. The giant collector moved protectively toward him immediately, standing between the boy and everyone else. Dax stared. That thing's protecting him now? He's royal blood, the conductor answered. The Hollow King's enormous stone hand reached upward toward the station. Closer now. Far too close. The entire underground chamber began collapsing around them. The conductor pointed toward the black train. Leave now or die beneath the first king. Dax didn't hesitate. Great advice. Moving. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the train. But Lyra stopped, because Selim wasn't following. The boy stood alone near the platform edge, staring at the colossal faceless god rising beneath the city. Tears streamed down his face. He's lonely, he whispered. Then the Hollow King opened his eyes for the first time in 10,000 years. The eyes were not human. They burned beneath the stone face of the Hollow King like twin suns buried inside an ocean trench. Vast, ancient, and impossibly sorrowful. Golden light flooded upward through the underground city of Evereth, illuminating towers abandoned for centuries. Every collector in the city fell to their knees simultaneously. The black train screamed across the rails without moving. And somewhere above them, Noctis Vale began dying faster. The psychic shockwave hit the surface instantly. Lyra Kane saw it through shattered gaps high above the underground ceiling. Thousands of lights exploding across skyscrapers as electrical grids failed all at once. Hover traffic fell from the sky. Entire districts vanished beneath toxic storms pouring through the broken weather shield. Emergency broadcasts dissolved into static. The Hollow King had awakened fully. Selim stood motionless near the edge of the abyss, bathed in the giant's golden stare. He remembers everything now, the boy whispered. Dax Mercer grabbed Lyra's shoulder hard. We need to leave immediately before the mountain-sized nightmare reaches us. But Lyra couldn't move, because the Hollow King wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at his son, and there was love in his eyes. Not rage, not madness, Love. The realization terrified her more than anything else so far. The giant collector beside Selim lowered its head reverently. All across Evereth, the kneeling collectors began whispering in perfect unison. The first king rises. The conductor stepped backward toward the train doors. The seal has failed completely. Lyra turned sharply. Then help us stop him. The blank-faced figure tilted its head. You misunderstand. The station trembled violently as another section of Noctis Vale collapsed somewhere overhead. We were never trying to stop him, the conductor said softly. Then the train doors closed. The black locomotive pulled away silently into darkness, carrying its masked passengers deeper beneath the city. Dax stared after it. I officially hate trains now. The Hollow King's colossal hand reached upward again. Closer. Stone fingers wrapped around the foundations of Evereth itself. Ancient buildings cracked apart under the pressure. Lyra rushed toward Selim as debris rained around the platform. We're leaving. Now. The boy looked up at her with tears in his eyes. He thinks I abandoned him. You're a child. I'm older than you. Lyra stopped. Selim wiped his face shakily. I just look like this. Another psychic pulse exploded outward from the Hollow King. This time the visions came clearer. Lyra saw Evereth during the poison years when the world above had become uninhabitable. Humanity starving. Cities collapsing beneath endless storms. Governments failing. Then came the king, a ruler who offered salvation. He descended beneath the earth with scientists, engineers, and thousands of survivors to build Evereth below the poisoned world. For a while he saved them. Then immortality changed him. The deeper they dug beneath the earth searching for energy strong enough to sustain the underground city, the more the king transformed into something vast and terrible. Not evil, hungry, and immortality without limits eventually devoured everything human inside him. So they betrayed him. They sealed him beneath Evereth, erased the city from history, and built Noctis Vale above the grave. The vision ended violently. Lyra nearly collapsed. Dax caught her. What did you see? The truth. The giant stone face continued rising through the abyss beneath the city. Golden eyes illuminated the entire underground world now. And the Hollow King was crying. Tears the size of waterfalls rolled down the massive stone face as he stared at Selim. Return home. The words echoed inside every mind simultaneously. Selim shook visibly. I can hear him thinking. What's he saying now? Lyra asked. The boy hesitated. He thinks humanity betrayed him again. Above them, explosions ripped through Noctis Vale. Huge sections of the upper city began sinking downward into newly opened sinkholes. Entire towers vanished into darkness as the buried foundations of Evereth shifted beneath them. Dax looked upward. There are still millions of people up there. Lyra understood suddenly. The Hollow King wasn't attacking. He was waking up, and his awakening alone was destroying the city built over his prison. Can he stop this? She asked Selim. The boy looked toward his father's enormous face. Yes. Then tell him to stop. Selim's expression broke apart. He won't listen to me anymore. The giant collector suddenly turned toward the upper city. Something new had entered Evereth. Gunships. Floodlights pierced the underground darkness as armored military carriers descended through collapsing tunnels from Noctis Vale above. Surface government forces. Dozens of aircraft surrounded the underground station immediately. Loudspeakers crackled alive. This is the civic authority of Noctis Vale. Step away from the entity. Dax blinked. Amazing. The idiots arrived. Soldiers flooded onto nearby platforms wearing sealed storm armor and carrying heavy plasma rifles. Their commander emerged behind them, a tall woman with silver markings along her uniform collar. Director Celine Vale, head of internal containment. Lyra recognized her instantly. You sealed Sector 9, Lyra said coldly. Celine ignored her completely. Her eyes locked onto Selim. There you are. Selim stepped backward in fear. The Hollow King's gaze shifted slowly toward the arriving soldiers. The temperature in Evereth dropped instantly. Celine raised one hand calmly. We contained him once, she said. We can do it again. Lyra stared at her in disbelief. You knew this was here? Of course we did. Another section of the underground city collapsed nearby. The Hollow King's giant hand tightened around broken towers. Selene's soldiers aimed directly at Selim. The child is the anchor, she said. Kill him, and the king destabilizes. Lyra immediately stepped in front of the boy. No. Dax moved beside her. Hard no. Selene's expression never changed. You have 30 seconds to surrender the asset. The Hollow King's eyes brightened violently. He had heard her, and for the first time since awakening, the ancient king became angry. The Hollow King roared without opening his mouth. The sound erupted directly inside human minds. Every soldier in Evereth dropped instantly. Some screamed. Some clawed at their helmets. Others simply collapsed unconscious as psychic pressure rolled through the underground city like a living storm. Director Selene Vale remained standing. Barely. Blood ran from one nostril as she stared upward into the glowing eyes of the ancient king. Fire! She ordered weakly. The soldiers obeyed. Plasma rounds exploded across the station platform in blinding blue flashes. The giant collector protecting Selim threw itself in front of the boy, absorbing the first barrage as molten holes burned through its black coat. Dax Mercer grabbed Lyra Kane and slammed both of them behind a shattered support pillar. Your city government sucks more than I originally estimated. Lyra peered around the debris. They're trying to provoke him. No kidding. Above them, the Hollow King's colossal hand tightened around the underground city. Ancient towers cracked apart. Entire rail bridges collapsed into the abyss below. The psychic pressure intensified. Selim screamed suddenly and fell to his knees, clutching his head. The Hollow King reacted instantly. One massive stone finger rose toward the station. Selene saw it coming. All units retreat, she shouted. Too late. The giant finger struck the underground platform with the force of an earthquake. The station disappeared. Steel vaporized. Rail lines twisted apart like string. Shockwaves hurled soldiers across the ruins, while the black train derailed screaming into darkness. Dax slammed into a wall hard enough to black out briefly. When his vision returned, everything had changed. Half the station was gone. Evereth itself was collapsing. Massive fractures spread through the underground city as the Hollow King continued rising from beneath it. Ancient buildings slid into the abyss one after another while dust clouds swallowed entire districts. And high above them, Noctis Vale burned. The upper city skyline tilted visibly now as foundational sectors failed beneath the collapsing underground world. Toxic storms poured through the shattered weather shield in violent green clouds. Millions of people were trapped between two dying cities. Lyra found Selim near the edge of the ruined platform. The boy was crying uncontrollably. He's afraid, he whispered. Lyra grabbed him hard. Your father is destroying everything. He doesn't understand. Another psychic pulse exploded outward from the Hollow King. This one carried emotion more than images. Loneliness, grief, betrayal stretched across 10,000 years. The feeling hit Lyra so powerfully it nearly stopped her heart. The king had awakened believing humanity sealed him underground and abandoned him again. And now soldiers were trying to kill his son. Dax staggered toward them holding his bruised ribs. Please tell me somebody has a plan besides dying emotionally. Selene Vale emerged from the smoke nearby with surviving soldiers regrouping behind her. Her face had hardened completely now. We end this immediately, she said. Lyra stood between her and Selim. You caused this. Selene didn't deny it. The city needed power. Dax stared at her. You dug into an ancient god for electricity? We discovered him beneath Sector 9 14 years ago, Selene replied coldly. Contained energy output from the lower chamber sustained 70% of Noctis Vale. Lyra felt sick. You harvested him. We survived because we did. Another massive tremor ripped through Evereth. The Hollow King had nearly fully emerged now. His gigantic shoulders pushed upward through the buried city, while golden eyes illuminated the collapsing ruins around them. Selene raised her weapon toward Selim. The anchor dies now. Lyra moved instantly. She slammed Celine's gun aside just as the shot fired. The plasma round tore through empty air. Every collector in Evereth froze. The Hollow King saw the attack. For the first time since awakening, the ancient king became furious. The psychic scream shattered windows across both cities simultaneously. Above Noctis Vale, entire skyscrapers split apart. Underground, collectors surged from the ruins in impossible numbers, climbing over debris toward Celine's forces like a black tide. The battle became chaos immediately. Soldiers opened fire while masked figures swarmed through smoke and collapsing steel. Plasma blasts illuminated falling towers around the underground chamber. Dax tackled Lyra behind cover as debris rained everywhere. "We need another plan right now." Selim suddenly grabbed Lyra's arm. "There's one way." The boy pointed toward the center of Evereth, where a massive circular structure rose beneath the collapsing city. Cathedral. Ancient. Half-buried beneath rubble. The Heart Chamber. Celine overheard immediately. Her face changed. "No." Selim looked at Lyra desperately. "That's where they sealed him originally. If I reach the chamber, I can calm him." Dax blinked. "You can do that?" "Maybe. That's not comforting." Celine stepped forward slowly, weapon lowered now. "The heart chamber cannot be opened," she said. Lyra realized the truth instantly. "That's where your reactors are." Celine said nothing, which was answer enough. Noctis Vale's government hadn't simply found the Hollow King. Selim reached the edge of the cathedral ruins, just as the giant stone fingers uncovered the heart chamber completely. The heart beneath Evereth pulsed like a red sun buried underground. Alive. Waiting. The boy looked upward toward his father. Then he stepped directly into the light. Everything stopped. The storms. The collapsing towers. The fighting. Even the heartbeat paused. Selim began dissolving slowly into golden particles. Not dying. Returning. The Hollow King lowered his gigantic face toward the chamber as tears streamed from his glowing eyes. And for the first time in 10,000 years, he remembered mercy. The psychic wave that followed spread across the entire planet. Lyra saw impossible visions flash across the sky above Noctis Vale. Evereth before the fall. The king carrying starving children through underground shelters. Building cities. Saving humanity from extinction. Loving them. Then being betrayed by the people he saved. And still choosing not to destroy them. Selim vanished completely into the chamber light. The Hollow King closed his eyes. Then slowly, the giant began descending back into the abyss beneath Evereth. The underground city trembled violently as ancient stone collapsed inward around him. Towers crumbled. Railways shattered. The cathedral sank downward into darkness. But the storms above Noctis Vale stopped spreading. The poisoned atmosphere calmed. The earthquakes weakened. The planet exhaled. Lyra watched silently as the colossal figure disappeared beneath the earth once more. Not imprisoned this time. Sleeping. By choice. The final thing visible before the abyss sealed itself was the Hollow King's golden eyes opening briefly one last time. Not angry. Peace. Then darkness closed over Evereth forever. 3 months later, Noctis Vale still stood. Barely. Half the city remained uninhabitable after the collapse night. Entire districts had vanished into the earth where Evereth once existed. Millions were displaced. Thousands dead. But humanity survived. Again. Official reports blamed seismic reactor failure. The truth never reached the public. Only a handful of people remembered the king beneath the world. Lyra stood one evening near the edge of the rebuilt Eastern District watching workers reconstruct the skyline beneath a new weather shield. Dax approached beside her carrying terrible coffee. "You think he's still down there?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked toward the distant ruins beneath the city. Far below the earth. Sleeping in darkness. Waiting. "Yes," she said softly. A warm wind passed through Noctis Vale. And somewhere deep beneath the world, a heartbeat answered.